This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to our daily crime and justice briefing. We have a heavy slate of stories today, ranging from high-profile celebrity trials to shocking developments in local courtrooms across the country.
Singer D4VD allegedly killed a teen to protect his career.
An Alabama man faces charges for a quadruple family murder.
A Minnesota man allegedly attacked his ex in a bathtub.
Mississippi police found a son attempting to flush human remains.
Scott Peterson's lawyers claim new science proves his innocence.
An Oregon man survived a random throat slashing at Denny's.
An Illinois father is charged in his infant's death.
A Washington juror allegedly committed a stabbing after trial.
Starting with the D4VD trial, the music world is reeling from the latest allegations against the singer D4VD, whose real name is David Anthony Burke. Prosecutors in Los Angeles are now alleging that Burke murdered 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, specifically to silence her before she could ruin his burgeoning music career. According to court documents filed this Wednesday, the district attorney's office claims that Hernandez had threatened to expose Burke's criminal conduct, leading him to orchestrate a brutal attack at his Hollywood Hills home in April 2025. The details are chilling. As prosecutors suggest, Burke paid for a rideshare to bring the teenager to his residence, only to stab her multiple times shortly after her arrival. He now faces charges of first-degree murder with special circumstances, along with lewd acts and mutilation of a body.
The prosecution's case includes a disturbing list of items Burke allegedly purchased under a fake name to cover up the crime. They claim he used Amazon and Postmates to order a shovel, body bags, chainsaws, and even a burn cage to incinerate evidence. Perhaps most gruesome is the allegation that he used an inflatable pool to contain the scene while dismembering the victim. Burke and his legal team have maintained his absolute innocence, stating that the actual evidence will prove he was not the cause of Hernandez's death. They've pointed out that no grand jury indictment has been returned yet, and they plan to defend him vigorously. A judge has set a follow-up date for later this month as the legal battle intensifies over these horrific accusations.
Next, in Alabama. In Mobile County, Alabama, a 54-year-old man named William Graham Oliver is facing 8 counts of capital murder following a truly nightmarish scene. Authorities allege that Oliver broke into a home and killed 46-year-old Lisa Gale Fields and her 2 children, 17-year-old Keziah Luker and 12-year-old Thomas Cordell Jr. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that Keziah was 8 months pregnant at the time of her death. The investigation began when Luker's partner, who was working offshore, noticed strange activity on a shared family planning app and asked a relative to check the house. When that relative entered the home at 2:30 in the morning, they discovered the victims in separate rooms, all bound with zip ties. It appears the victims were killed in different manners, including stabbing and shooting.
Sheriff Paul Birch noted that Oliver lived only a few miles away and had known the family for some time. The evidence recovered from Oliver's residence, including a vehicle and other supporting items, led investigators to believe he acted alone in this quadruple murder. The community is understandably devastated, especially given the ages of the children and the loss of the unborn baby. Oliver's charges include capital murder of 2 or more persons and murder during a burglary, which could carry the heaviest penalties under Alabama law. The sheriff emphasized how difficult these cases are for first responders when children are involved. As the legal process moves forward, the focus remains on the sheer brutality of the zip tie restraints and the calculated nature of the attacks within the family's own home.
Moving to Minnesota, a terrifying domestic violence incident in Mankato, Minnesota, has left 1 man dead and a woman severely injured. Joseph David Bulfer, 44, allegedly broke into his ex-girlfriend's townhome and used an AR-15 to kill her new boyfriend, 52-year-old Joshua Robert Downey. According to the criminal complaint, the woman and Downey were simply watching movies when Bulfer burst through the locked front door and ran upstairs. After fatally shooting Downey, Bulfer allegedly forced the woman into a bathroom and beat her with the butt of the rifle. The details from the 911 call are haunting. Downey actually managed to call for help himself after being shot, and the dispatcher could hear Bulfer threatening the woman, telling her that the death was her fault and instructing her to get into the bathtub.
The woman suffered a collapsed lung, broken ribs, and a head laceration during the assault. She told police that she had broken up with Bulfer months prior, but he had called her earlier that day wanting to talk. When police arrived at the scene after neighbors reported gunshots, they found the woman cowering in the tub and Bulfer still on the premises. He was immediately detained and is now facing charges of murder, attempted murder, and assault. This case highlights the extreme danger of domestic escalation, as the victim had clearly tried to move on with her life before this violent intrusion. Bulfer remains in the Blue Earth County Jail as the investigation continues into the specific threats heard on the recorded emergency line, which provide a grim window into the final moments of the attack.
Now to Mississippi. In Natchez, Mississippi, deputies responded to a welfare check that revealed what the sheriff described as the most heinous crime he has ever witnessed. 29-year-old Zachary Lavelle Jackson Jr. is accused of murdering and dismembering his mother, Lana Brown Bradley, a beloved retired teacher. When investigators arrived at the home, they were met with a strong smell of cleaning chemicals and a slippery floor, suggesting an attempt to scrub the crime scene. They eventually found Jackson in a locked bathroom, where he was allegedly attempting to flush pieces of his mother's flesh down the toilet. The situation grew even more grim when a search of the surrounding wooded area led to the discovery of Bradley's head. Other remains were reportedly found packed into a suitcase, showing a calculated effort to hide the body.
The motive appears to be linked to a domestic dispute, as Bradley had reportedly begun to fear for her safety and was planning to evict Jackson from her home. Jackson had allegedly threatened her previously, and his brother noted that it was highly unusual for him to be cleaning the house so thoroughly. Jackson now faces charges of first- and second-degree murder, mayhem, and tampering with evidence. The local community is in shock over the loss of Bradley, who was well known and respected as a former educator. Sheriff Travis Patton praised the diligence of his deputies, noting that they had to go above and beyond to find the evidence Jackson had tried so hard to destroy. Jackson is currently being held as the legal system begins to process this deeply disturbing case of matricide.
Next, Scott Peterson. The infamous case of Scott Peterson is back in the headlines as his attorneys prepare a new appeal following a recent setback in the California courts. Peterson was convicted of the 2002 murders of his wife Lacey and their unborn son Connor. While his death sentence was overturned in 2020, he is currently serving life without parole. The Los Angeles Innocence Project has taken up his cause, arguing that new scientific evidence regarding the timing of the deaths could completely exonerate him. At the original trial, experts testified that Connor died on December 23rd, a window where Peterson was the only person with Lacey. However, the defense now claims that modern ultrasound technology and updated research suggest the death actually occurred between December 28th and January 5th, a time when Peterson would have had an alibi.
The Los Angeles Innocence Project expressed deep disappointment after a judge dismissed their latest petition, claiming the ruling shows a misunderstanding of the law. They argue that the jury in the original trial relied on what they call false and unreliable scientific evidence from the 1980s. By shifting the timeline of the tragedy, the defense hopes to prove that Lacey was still alive after Peterson's reported disappearance on Christmas Eve. This case has remained a point of intense public fascination for over 2 decades, and this latest legal maneuver represents Peterson's most significant attempt at freedom in years. Despite the recent dismissal, his legal team is pledging to continue the fight, insisting that the new data eviscerates the prosecution's original theory of the crime and demands a fresh look at the evidence.
Shifting to Oregon. A mother in Oregon experienced a parent's worst nightmare when she learned through a news clip that her son had been the victim of a random, brutal attack. Christopher Thomas was walking near a strip mall in Portland when a stranger, Christopher Parkins, allegedly blindsided him and slashed his throat. The wound was so severe that police reported his trachea was exposed. Thomas managed to stumble into a nearby Denny's restaurant, where employees acted quickly to provide aid and call for emergency services. His mother, Deborah Thomas, credits those workers with saving his life, stating that he would have bled to death if they hadn't intervened so fast. Parkins was later apprehended with a knife still hidden in his sleeve and told investigators he had been awake for days using meth and drinking whiskey.
Parkins reportedly told police that everything felt like it wasn't real during the attack, a statement that points toward a drug-induced psychosis. He is now facing charges of attempted murder and assault, and is being held without bond. Meanwhile, Christopher Thomas has undergone surgery and is on the road to recovery, though the psychological impact of such a random act of violence is immense. His mother remains incredibly thankful for the strangers who stepped up in a moment of crisis. The case has sparked discussions about public safety and the intersection of homelessness and substance abuse in the Portland area. As Parkins awaits his next hearing in May, the focus remains on the heroic actions of the Denny's staff, who turned a potential tragedy into a story of survival against all odds.
Now to Illinois. In Rockford, Illinois, 27-year-old Jaden Hearns is being held in jail following the tragic death of his 7-month-old son. Police were called to Hearns' home on a Sunday morning regarding an unresponsive infant who later died at the hospital from blunt force trauma. Medical examinations revealed the baby had suffered 2 skull fractures, multiple rib fractures, and a broken femur. Hearns initially claimed he had no idea what happened, but later told investigators he was playing video games in the early morning hours when he heard the baby crying. His story reportedly changed several times during questioning, and he cited a bad memory for the inconsistencies. Adding to the gravity of the situation, Hearns was already on pretrial release for a domestic battery case involving the baby's mother while she was pregnant.
The court heard that Hearns had been ordered to have no contact with the mother, yet she frequently stayed at his home, though she wasn't there during the fatal incident. Surveillance footage from the home also allegedly showed Hearns carrying a firearm, and police recovered a rifle and ammunition on the property. Because of these violations and the new murder charges, a judge ordered that Hearns remain in custody without bond. The case is a devastating example of a failure in the pretrial release system. As Hearns was already known to authorities for violent behavior, he is now facing charges of murder and aggravated domestic battery. His next court appearance is scheduled for late May, as the community mourns the loss of an infant who suffered such extensive and inexplicable injuries while in his father's care.
Finally, Washington State. A bizarre legal situation is unfolding in Snohomish County, Washington, where a convicted killer is seeking a new trial based on the actions of one of his jurors. Kevin Rodriguez was recently found guilty of second-degree murder for a 2019 stabbing death. However, just days after the verdict was delivered, one of the jurors, 20-year-old Connor Wolleben, was arrested for allegedly breaking into a home and stabbing 2 people. Rodriguez's defense argues that this shows the juror had a predisposition for the very type of crime he was judging. Wolleben reportedly suffers from schizophrenia, and his alleged attack was stopped only when a 22-year-old woman at the scene put him in a chokehold until police arrived. This unprecedented overlap between a juror's private actions and the case they just decided has created a significant legal knot.
The motion for a new trial highlights the irony that Rodriguez was convicted of a butcher knife attack, and then a member of his jury allegedly committed a similar crime almost immediately afterward. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office praised the bravery of the woman who subdued Wolleben, noting she likely saved lives. For Rodriguez, this represents a potential third chance at a trial, as his first conviction was already overturned on appeal. Prosecutors will now have to navigate the implications of having a juror who may have been experiencing a mental health crisis during the deliberations. It raises serious questions about the jury selection process and how much the court can know about a juror's stability. As the court considers the motion, the families of the victims in both cases are left waiting for a final resolution.
That concludes our briefing for today. Thank you for joining us for these important updates.
Be sure to follow this show for your next daily update on the stories that matter most. We will see you back here tomorrow.